Modi has also arrived in Geneva as he begins his visit linked to the G7 summit outreach engagements. Prime Minister landed at Geneva airport and is expected to participate in a series of high-level meetings and discussions on crucial global issues during this visit. And we've got breaking developments coming in. It is the first statement from Indian Prime Minister after his arrival. After landing in Geneva ahead of G7 summit, he met a Swiss president at the airport. This is what Prime Minister has said. Heading to Evian for G7 summit. He says he has had a great discussion with the Swiss leader. This is the post that has been put out by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The first statement coming in from the Prime Minister of India as he lands in Geneva ahead of the crucial interactions that are going to take place. He was received at the airport by the Swiss president. He says, from here, I will go to Evian for the G7 summit. At the airport, met Mr. Guy Parmelin, president of the Swiss Confederation. Had a great discussion with him. Right, so a lot of attention and focus will be on G7 summit, especially from India's perspective tomorrow as Prime Minister Narendra Modi meets US President Donald Trump. A lot of domestic politics also going on the sidelines of this summit. There are leaders from the Indian opposition who have been raising questions about 3 Indians who were killed in recent attacks on ships in the conflict region of Hormuz, with both US and Iran pinning blame on each other, and Indian domestic opposition Congress party saying, why are those questions not being raised by the Indian Prime Minister and the Indian leadership, and will they be raised tomorrow as he meets Donald Trump? Now, this year's summit is being held under France's G7 presidency, and the agenda reflects a world in crisis. The Israel-Iran conflict is expected to dominate discussions at the summit. The Israel-Iran conflict, as well as wider Middle East security situation, will also be a key focus. Here is the ground report.
So we're on this beautiful ferry ride between Switzerland and France. On this side, you can see Switzerland. You can see the city of Geneva behind you, the city of Lausanne, the beautiful Lake Geneva. Between the Swiss side and the French side, we're headed to the French side to Evian-le-Bain, which is where the G7 meeting has gotten underway. President Trump of the United States has landed in Evian. The French President Emmanuel Macron has hosted a dinner for all the visiting dignitaries. That is the first day and the official kickoff of the G7 Leaders Summit. Ahead of arriving here, and you can see the beautiful French mountains here in the background. Some of those are snow-capped. We were speaking to our cab driver yesterday, and he said that there are a couple of mountains. Mont Blanc, for example, which is the highest peak in this side of the Alps, is apparently snow-covered throughout the year. We're here in the middle of June. It's peak summer. It feels like almost 40 degrees in France. But this Mont Blanc, which is the highest peak in this part of the world, is snow-capped and snow-covered through the entire year. So it's a beautiful part of the world. It's a massive lake, France on the one side, Switzerland on the other side. And that, of course, is host to one of the most powerful delegations, or one of the most powerful summits that the world has ever seen, and that is in the G7. And, of course, there is added context to this year's G7 because of the 3-month-long war between Iran and America, Israel, and whether Israel will honor its end of the bargain. Already you're seeing voices, hawkish right-wing voices in Bibi Netanyahu's government who are saying that they will not abide by the diktats or the tenets of this peace agreement. There are differences of opinion between Trump and Netanyahu. How much can Trump rein in Netanyahu? That is the big question right now. We will be keeping a close eye out for all the developments flowing out of Evian-le-Bain here in France, in the beautiful French alpine town. Prime Minister Modi is going to be here on Tuesday, and the all-important meeting between him and President Trump is going to happen on Wednesday afternoon. They will have a lot to discuss, most recently the killings of the 3 Indian sailors, and of course the interim trade agreement, which still is proving to be elusive. With camera person Rajkishore Mal, this is Zaka Jacob off Lake Geneva in the beautiful waters of Lake Geneva between Switzerland and France.
Apart from the conflict, leaders will also be discussing trade tensions, tariffs and economic stability as protectionist measures continue to impact global commerce. The Russia-Ukraine war remains high on the agenda, with discussions expected on sanctions, military support and Europe's security architecture. G7 nations are also looking to deepen development partnerships with Africa amidst growing strategic competition for influence on the continent. Now, alongside this, energy security, critical minerals, artificial intelligence, and the digital transition will also feature prominently as countries seek to secure future growth while reducing strategic vulnerabilities. Now, these are some of the issues that are going to be on the agenda. There is a global trade, there are tariffs, there is economic stability that needs to be looked at, there are wars that are ongoing, Russia-Ukraine war that refuses to end, then global developments as well as African partnership is also going to be on the table. Now, why is India here? Because we are not a member of this G7 grouping, but this is the 7th summit that India is going to be attending. The question that everybody is asking could be, why does G7 keep calling India back? That's because many of the world's biggest challenges cannot be discussed without India at the table. India is the world's fastest growing major economy, a key player in global supply chains, a leading voice of the global south, and an increasingly important strategic partner for Western nations. As companies pursue a China plus one strategy, India has emerged as a major manufacturing and investment destination. At the same time, New Delhi maintains influence across multiple power centers, from the G20 and Quad to BRICS and a developing world. So all that puts a lot of focus on the G7 summit. And on your screens right now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visuals. He has just arrived in Evian for the G7 summit. And PM had earlier said he's looking forward to engaging with world leaders and exchanging views on key global issues, as well as India's commitment was reiterated to advancing collective efforts for more sustainable and prosperous planet. Visuals on your screens of Prime Minister Narendra Modi arriving at Evian on the sidelines of the G7 summit. Of course, the highlight for India in this is going to be the all-important interaction with Donald Trump, US President, tomorrow. That is going to take place in the evening. Zaka, we are getting latest visuals of Prime Minister Narendra Modi as he lands in Evian and interacts with all the senior leaders. What is going to be the most important issue on the agenda? Of course, we know that this trip comes amidst the global conflict and signs of perhaps that conflict resolving itself by this Friday.
Yeah, so the Prime Minister has a couple of important bilateral meetings in the evening. But before that, at about 3 o'clock local time, which is in a couple of hours from now, he will be taking part in the G7 outreach program, which has, among others, India is, of course, one of the outreach countries. But the other countries that are part of the outreach program are Qatar, South Korea, Brazil, etc. So there will be comments by the Prime Minister in that outreach summit. Remember, India has positioned itself for the last few years, since the G20 that India hosted in 2023, as the voice of the global south. So this meeting will also have a representative from the African Union. So in that sense, it is the developed world, the Western world, meeting the global south. And of course, India will be playing its role as a prominent voice of the global south. So that's his first engagement. Later in the evening, around 5:30 local time, he will have his first bilateral meeting, which will be with Prime Minister Mark Carney of Canada. Remember, India and Canada have been trying to negotiate and arrive at a comprehensive economic partnership, or a CEPA. And given that both India and Canada have had their own trade problems and issues with the United States, it is imperative that both India and Canada can sign and lock in this CEPA. So there will be discussions and stock taking of the progress of these negotiations of CEPA when both Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Carney meet. Subsequent to that, he will be meeting with Prime Minister Keir Starmer of the UK. Remember, India and the UK have already signed a free trade agreement. It is one of the first major free trade agreements that India has with any Western nation. So they will take stock of the progress of the FTA and also how to realize their vision of India-UK trade for 2030. There will also be some discussion about, some of the pressing global problems right now, whether it is the Iran war, the Russia-Ukraine war. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky is one of the guests of honor today at the G7. He will be interacting with the other G7 leaders as well. And the final meeting, the bilateral meeting that Prime Minister Modi will have later this evening, is with the UAE President Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. UAE, of course, is extremely important to India. It's one of the first countries that we had an FTA with. More importantly, there are about 35 lakh Indians who live and work in the UAE. And in the context of this war over the last 3 months, the UAE has taken quite a battering from Iran, whether it is their oil refineries, whether it is their American military bases, and even the airport had taken a few hits during the course of this war. So there will be a sort of stock taking, if you will, of the progress that have happened in the negotiations and this deal that's going to be signed on Friday here in Geneva in Switzerland, when the US Vice President J.D. Vance will be signing it on behalf of the US government, and Mr. Ghalibaf will be representing the Iranian side.
Right. This is a grouping that comprises of some of the world's most industrialized nations. And what Zaka underlines there is how India continues to be valued as an important participant, a voice of global South that we have come to represent now. We'll keep tracking developments, taking a very quick breather right now.